time to talk about the completely legitimate grooming scare. And this is the effectively the way that leftists and members of the establishment media are trying to paint the current groomer scare as just another example of a red scare like we had back in the 1950s, that being to discredit it. And once again, related to that, if you're watching this on YouTube, this live broadcast will have already aired, but if you want to become a premium member, you can go to the website, pay £5 a month, and you'll be able to check out the VOD of our premium podcast we're doing later, which is What Exactly Are Leftists Teaching Our Kids, where Thomas and I will be going through a curriculum from the Seattle Public Schools on their LGBT curriculum. So if you're interested, check that out on lotuseaters.com. Moving on, I think what the general reaction to a lot of the anti-groomer stuff, for the people who agree with the anti-groomer stuff, can be summed up with this picture here, which is when you tell a Democrat they can't teach sex to kindergartners, they're just furious about it. They can't contain their rage that they can't groom your children and then take them away from you because they're state property. This is what people are seething about. The left has decided to try and arrange themselves into a reaction to this, left being reactionary, to right-wing action, proactive action against groomers, which you'd think that everybody would be able to get behind, but apparently not. So we've got this Washington Post article saying the new Red Scare, the right leans into paedophilia accusations. I don't know if they understand that anybody with a basic conception of history, or at least American history, you would hope that Americans would know about this, would know that McCarthyism and the Red Scare was very much justified by the fact that a lot of those people that McCarthy spoke to ended up being communists. They all came out as being communists.
Literally,
and when the Kremlin released a lot of documentation after the fall of collapse of the Soviet Union, it turned out they had a lot of communist agents in a lot of places. For instance, in the New York Times, they were actively printing, publishing articles written by a woman, Ella Winter, I believe her name was, who turned out to be a Kremlin spy. So, yes, there was a lot to actually be concerned about in the 1950s, let alone to say that America was at war with them. It was a Cold War, yes, but a war nonetheless. So let's see how these smear merchants are going to characterize the anti-groomer agenda that the right has been so successful with so far. So, upon learning that three moderate Republican Senators Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, and Mitt Romney, make a note of those names if they're anywhere near you, would support the Supreme Court nomination of Ketanji Brown Jackson, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene offered the most derogatory, simplistic disparagement she could muster. Murkowski, Collins, and Romney are pro-pedophile, Greene wrote on Twitter. They just voted for KBJ. Nice one. Very impressive, very based, Marjorie, because absolutely you could paint them that way. And this is all in regards to the fact that Brown Jackson has been shown through her previous records as a court justice to be quite light on people going under child pornography charges. She's not been giving them the extended sentences that they should rightfully have earned, I would say. And a lot of the left, and even some on the conservative establishment, have been saying, actually, this isn't a bad thing. This is actually very normal. Because don't you understand? Every judge in America goes light on child pornography and paedophiles nowadays, which is not the own that you think it is, because guess what? Everybody else who's also going light on paedophiles, I think we should also be criticising them, possibly taking them away from situations where children have been hurt. It carries on. Nor is a vote in support of Jackson's pro-paedophile in any rational sense. Greene's argument is rooted in accusations levelled against Jackson during her nomination hearings by Senator Josh Hawley and others alleging that she'd been unusually lax in sentencing those charged with crimes related to child pornography. As both fact-checkers, we know how reliable those guys are, and conservatives pointed out, those allegations were unfounded. Unfounded because apparently everyone goes light on child pornography and paedophile charges, which is terrible. I shouldn't have to say this, but apparently we've got to keep hammering this home. But for many on the right, soft on child porn became a central part of Jackson's purported philosophy. Well, I mean, she was very apologetic towards them in those court hearings. She was like, oh, but if we actually charged them with the full extent of their crimes, they could go away for years. Good.
Yes.
Good. This is a...
Like they're molesting children.
Yes, well, they're facilitating a market which thrives off of the molestation of children. children and abuse of children, which
Yeah.
I think should be reasonably punished quite severely.
Yeah.
Yes, before being elected to Congress, she was this is Marjorie Taylor Greene. She was active in promoting the extremist QAnon ideology, a centerpiece of which is based on false claims that there's a cabal of powerful people who engaged in abusing children. How can people still try and make the claim that there was no powerful cabal of people abusing children when we have both Epstein, who definitely killed himself, and Ghislaine Maxwell, who was recently actually charged and put away in prison for organising a child trafficking ring, presumably of just one person, her and Jeff Epstein, because nobody else gone down for it. Release the lists, please. Also, they're just going with the classic. She believed this widely discredited thing, so she can never be right again. People can be wrong on some things and right on others, but if you which you should know. At this point, though, insinuations about Democrats embracing paedophilia or downplaying sex crimes victimizing children are not simply the political fringe making its way into the Capitol. Instead, paedophile or groomer, a term used to describe people who try to prepare children for abuse, has of late replaced socialist as a preferred political pejorative. Long-standing potency of elevating fears about the safety of children has combined with specific political flights like the Jackson nomination and Florida's new legislation limiting instruction about non-heterosexual relationships to spur on a new rhetorical focus.
Well, that's not entirely untrue.
Talk about run-on sentences. That was just one whole sentence. Anyway, once again, mischaracterization, lying about it. It's not purely about non-heterosexual relationships. It is about sexuality in general. You cannot speak to small children who are not yours about sexuality and tell them about gender or anything like that. You are there to teach them maths. The Red Scare is now the Kids Scare. Ooh, do you feel that in the air? Ooh, we've got a Red Scare coming. And once again, like the Red Scare, is completely justified. McCarthyism being evil is a complete myth, and your teachers lied to you, like they're lying to these children. They go on to talk about the anti-groomer bill. When Disney spoke out against the law, the backlash was fierce. Clearly, some on the right seem to think that one of the state's largest employers wasn't acting out of concern for its workers, but was instead a virulently pro-pedophilia organization. We'll get to that. Again, this push is not a function of QAnon, but shares a similar root. QAnon thrived in part because it tapped into a deep-seated fear of abuse of children. Why should I not be concerned about that? And if Florida's legislation is about blocking efforts to molest little kids instead of simply pandering to conservative voters, then opposition to the legislation means that you're aligned with unqualified evil. Yes. It is directly comparable to the Red Scare, then. America faced an existential threat from communists purportedly intermingling in government and culture. No, confirmed mingling in government and culture. Now it's paedophiles, exactly as QAnon warned. The political value is the same, even if the purported threat isn't. This is not a fake scare. Plenty of this has very well documented evidence. In fact, what I would argue is that we're seeing the logical culmination of a lot of things, that one of those main things being gender ideology, otherwise known as queer theory in its formal application, which is visibly being pushed in schools. And you may ask yourself, where does this gender ideology come from? Well, it comes from a range of different sources, but one of the main ones, I've not got any sources for this because the page that I found had suspiciously been taken down regarding this, but there is one sexologist called Dr. John Money, who has been said that if any individual can be said to be responsible for modern gender ideology, it's John Money. He coined the terms gender role, gender identity. He coined the term sexual orientation as a replacement for sexual preference. He also popularized the word paraphilia to replace the word perversions in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. Okay, so he came up with a few terms. What does that have to do with abuse, or child abuse in particular? Well, you may be aware of the case of Bruce Raymer, a child who, as a baby, suffered an accident during a circumcision. You can imagine what happened. It was a botched circumcision. And Dr. John Money decided to come in and valiantly say, don't worry, I can fix your child by transitioning him. He then transitioned the child, and for the rest of that child's life, Bruce Raymer, I forget what the name of his transition was observed by Dr. John Money, who made him take photographs with his brother in the nude, so that they, for research purposes, and then, of course, Bruce Raymer and his brother later on in life killed themselves. And Dr. John Money, when criticised for all of this when it came out, said that it was actually all right-wing propaganda, which is a pretty typical response. What? And there are also actual queer theorists like Gail Rubin. Here is a quote from her 1991, I think, essay, Thinking Sex, Notes for a Radical Theory. It is harder for most people to sympathise with actual boy lovers. Like communists and homosexuals in the 1950s, boy lovers are so stigmatised that it is difficult to find defenders for their civil liberties, let alone for their erotic orientation. Consequently, the police have feasted on them. Local police, the FBI, and watchdog postal inspectors have joined to build a huge apparatus whose sole aim is to wipe out the community of men who love underage youth. No, it's not that they're abusing them, it's that they love them, you see. In 20 years or so, when some of the smoke has cleared, it will be much easier to show that these men have been the victims of a savage and undeserved witch hunt. A lot of people will be embarrassed by the collaboration with this persecution, but it will be too late to do much good for those men who have spent their lives in prison. End quote. And deservedly so.
Yes, just a bit.
Sadly, it does seem that her prophecy here seems to be actually playing out a little bit, given that we are actively trying to stop groomers, and then there seems to be a wide contingency of political activists trying to stop us from stopping children being groomed. So sadly, Gail Rubin turns out to have been somewhat of a soothsayer in her predictions there. These are things that progressives now have part of their ideology, whether they realise it or not. And the Washington Post is already starting to toe this whole witch hunt line that she was putting. Let's look at some other connections and evidence. You may remember that they were coming for your children. That's right, it's the San Francisco Gay Men's Choir who were telling us they were going to convert our children and make them ever so much more tolerant. Does everybody remember how a few of those guys turned out to be groomers? Convicted paedophiles.
Surprise, surprise.
I know, surprise, surprise. The Wayback Machine found that obtains the apparently scrubbed list of chorus members and cross-referenced those names with a database of registered sex offenders in California. While the matches could be coincidental, some offenders may just happen to have the same name as members of the choir and be about the right age. What these people unearthed was at least 4 credible matches: David Wallace, Lawrence Earl Friedberg, Louis Quadra, and Keith Pepper. David Eugene Wallace was convicted of lewd or lascivious acts with a child under 14 years of age in 1985. There is a David Sean Wallace listed on the chorus roster. One Twitter user also pointed out that one of the singers in the viral video looked similar to Wallace's mugshot. Let's take a look at that image. Have we got the... No, we don't seem to have the tweet up, but that's fine. We'll just move on because it's the same guy. That's basically what I'm saying. Okay, I think John's getting it up. Yeah, if you take a look at the bottom left picture, John. Yeah, so here you can see David Eugene Wallace, his mugshot. Looks an awful lot like that guy there. I don't know how well you can see it on the screen.
Yeah, there's a resemblance, isn't there?
Almost certainly the same guy, allegedly. We've also got weirdos in the New York Times comments, bringing it back to James Lindsay. He posted this on Twitter, where somebody was saying, Disney is sexualizing children? Let's be clear, children are sexual beings, and this is just some rando. In Virginia as well, in the comments of the New York Times, presumably she voted Democrat, from the start, children are sexual. What children deserve is help understanding their sexual thoughts and feelings. Maybe we should be more horrified that something as unnatural as religion is taught to children. Given the spread of wokeism, I would say religion actually comes perfectly natural to people.
I would take almost any religion other than the one we're currently staring at the moment.
I know, right? And this also does sound just like a thinly veiled excuse, let's be perfectly honest, because Libs of TikTok, who we've covered a number of times, does the Lord's work, and recently has come out with this, something interesting. This is how gender ideology is affecting the way that schools operate, even not necessarily on a teacher-to-student basis, but on a student-to-student relationship basis. So this is Salem School just issued new procedures for trans students, because that's something we need to worry about now, which states school staff will not disclose any information that may reveal a student's transgender status to others, including caregivers. So name and gender changes will be kept confidential from the parents. These people do not think that you, as the parent, have the right to know what is going on with your underage child. This is grooming 101.
Yeah.
Isolate from the parents. every single grooming, anti-grooming discussion that you might have with somebody who knows how to see the telltale signs will tell you this is the first thing you do. You isolate them from any caregiver or anybody who might care.
Clear them out, for the love of God.
I know, clear them out. AA is starting to make a lot of sense with the clear them out, I will say. We move along because there's more to this. So here, there's more students can use any bathroom and locker room that corresponds to their gender identity, according to these new policies. I see nothing going wrong here.
Oh, no, none at all.
No, Loudoun County, check out premium podcast of the Lotus Eaters content if you want to learn more about that on the website, lotuseaters.com. Move along again. They can also choose which rooms to sleep in when they go on overnight field trips. Once again, what could go wrong? Honestly. And bringing it back to Disney as well, Libs of TikTok pointed out that Disney employees have recently been going around the California headquarters staging a walkout protest, chanting "Say Gay" to protest Florida's anti-grooming bill, which is obviously very stunning and brave, but Disney coming out against an anti-groomer bill doesn't look fantastic when you consider that they've got a bit of a child predator problem within staff. This has been reported on numerous times. Let's move along. So Disney has a long-standing problem with child predators gaining employment within the company and exploiting minors. You'd think, given that they're a company that appeals mainly to children, they would have a very tight process for this, but apparently they just come on in, guys, don't worry. In 2014, reporters at CNN published a bombshell 6-month investigation that discovered at least 35 Disney employees had been arrested for sex crimes against children, attempting to meet minors for sex and possessing child pornography over the previous 8 years. In one case, police set up a sting operation that nabbed 3 Disney employees who believed that they were soliciting sex from minors. Robert Kingsolver, who oversaw ride repairs at Disney World, enticed someone he thought was a 14-year-old girl for sex in a private residence. Joel Torres, another Disney employee, allegedly bought condoms with him to have sex with a 14-year-old child, and Alan Treaster, a concierge at the park's Animal Kingdom Lodge, went to meet a 14-year-old boy to fulfill a fantasy of being a big teddy bear for younger chaser.
No. How the hell is this not a national scandal?
Well, it was a big news report at the time, but Disney always seem to be able to get away with these things because there is also recent allegations. Well, not allegations, and 4 more Disney employees in Florida specifically were arrested in a big child trafficking sting that Florida police did. So there's another one. So while it may not be a great look for Disney to be going against the anti-groomer bill, I will say it is definitely on brand. We also have just other random people online talking about this sort of stuff. Children as young as preschool age not only comprehend but can openly discuss subjects as varied as gender diversity, gender non-conformity, and gender-based oppression, making it the ideal time to begin creating a foundation for lifelong sexual health. Children as young as preschool age have only just barely got the comprehension to be able to go to the toilet properly. So how on earth can you expect them to understand concepts like gender non-conformity? And why do they need to know this unless you are trying to brainwash them? Many people have said that this brainwashing process is for the next step in what I would like to refer to as a soft cultural revolution that the left is trying to pull from underneath.
Hence why they're targeting the youngest possible age groups.
Yes, they're trying to basically brainwash our children before anybody can know what's going on, and then the next generation will be able to, right underneath our noses, change everything about the societies that we live in, and not for the better.
It is a long march towards something truly awful.
Yeah. Chris Rufo has been very good at pointing a lot of this stuff out. He seems to have changed his tactics recently from focusing primarily on critical race theory to a lot of the groomer stuff, just like James Lindsay has. And he pointed out, as was pointed out in that Disney child predator article that I was just reading, that even CNN back in the day covered this stuff with Disney. Everybody knows that Disney has had this problem. Nowadays, CNN, I don't know if they would be supporting this or not, but back in the day, they did some good work, I suppose, turns out. And the other thing that something I covered recently on the podcast the other week was that Chris Rufo brought to everybody's attention that there was a sexy summer camp for kids where they could learn all about all of your favorite intersectional talking points. And one of the interesting things about this, because it was very gender ideology driven, they were talking about, how you could be a sex worker and stuff like that to young teenagers, young impressionable teenagers. This was one thing. The leader of the Sexy Summer Camp recommended that children begin to masturbate as toddlers. Masturbation is really healthy, and I recommend it to people of all ages. All ages. As soon as my nephews could talk, they were doing that.
There's only one just result to this: death penalty. I'm sorry. It's that bad.
I will be happy to hear the argument for that. But so Washington Post and anyone on the left who's trying to say that this is a Red Scare hoax, is this enough evidence? I think it is, and you can't keep denying this. We need to get the groomers out of schools. We need to stop infesting everything with gender ideology. Stop it now.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the content we have on the site, such as this article by Baudet on Will Smith is not suicidal. Trust me, bro. But also, if you'd like to follow what else we're bringing out, you can follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.